So today we're going to talk about 7 strange habits of narcissistic parents. We're going to talk about the wounds that they carry for life and why none of them have ever felt strange to you. We're going to look at the small, odd things that you do every day without you even noticing them. We're not doing this to blame anyone, but because these are the last pieces and the places that the old programming is still hiding below the veil of consciousness. If you were raised by a narcissistic parent, you've agreed with something you did not even know that you were agreeing with, something you did not want to agree with. You've explained yourself to somebody who never asked. You've talked yourself out of a kind thought about yourself before you even finished having the thought, because the damage does not show up in these big, large moments. The damage shows up in the habits that we keep at the subconscious level, the small ones, the kind you would never think to mention to anyone. Hi everybody, I'm Lisa A. Romano, the Breakthrough Life Coach, and for over 20 years, I've helped thousands of adult children of dysfunction learn to self-heal from codependency and emotional neglect and break free from the narcissistic abuse that often leads to one developing codependency and the habit of self-abandonment. So let's start with number 1. You cannot have a kind thought about yourself without something interrupting it. So let me ask you a question. Have you ever caught yourself starting to feel proud of yourself, like when you look in the mirror after you've dressed up or you finish a project at work, and for just a split second, there's this encouraging thought that enters your mind saying that you actually did a really good job. But before that thought can even land, here it comes. A harsh, quiet reflex inside you whispers that you shouldn't get ahead of yourself. And maybe you even hear the words, "Who do you think you are?" That immediate interruption, it's not an accident. It's a deeply ingrained neurobiological response. When I was first learning to basically coach myself out of old subconscious patterns, I remember jumping into my car one afternoon, looking in the rearview mirror. And before I could even settle in, I heard a voice inside my head say, "You look like crap today." I froze. But because I was actively training myself to notice my thoughts, I caught that thought, and I quickly realized that that thought wasn't even my voice. Growing up in a narcissistic home, we were not allowed to be proud of ourselves. And we were never told we were beautiful. We were never told we were good. And in fact, my father used to sing a song that went like this. "You is an ugly child. Who could your father be? If I was your daddy, I would go jump in the sea." Over and over and over, my father would repeat this song. And he thought it was funny. But to a child's developing brain, those words left deep subconscious scars that I have spent a lifetime reprogramming. But now I teach other people to do it too. Here's the neuroscience perspective. Your developing brain learned to link self-appreciation with emotional danger if this happened to you. So to keep you safe from criticism or envy, your amygdala learned to treat self-praise as a cue for impending rejection, building a high-speed neural pathway where a kind thought about yourself triggers a threat response and deploys a critical inner monologue to neutralize that risk. When that rapid interruption happens, realize that it's not your authentic self speaking, but the echoed voice of a caregiver who possibly could not tolerate your light or your airiness or your happiness. Firing through an automated neural loop, that's what's going on. In coaching, we know that what gets tracked can get transformed. And since you cannot rewire a neural pathway until you make it conscious, your daily coaching goal for today is to bridge the gap by catching the interruption and actively finishing the original kind thought. The moment you catch that counter thought in the rearview mirror, of your mind, pause, freeze the frame, and label the mechanism by telling yourself your amygdala is mistaking self-kindness for danger and that that's just old programming. Then deliberately complete the circuit out loud by saying, I am worthy, I am capable, and it is safe for me to see my own beauty and my worth today. Now, to build and reinforce this new neural pathway, keep a simple self-compassion counter on your phone or in a notebook where you tally every time you catch the automatic interruption and reassert your kind thought. Now, here's why. Because reviewing those numbers at the end of a week gives your brain tangible proof of progress, and it signals to your nervous system that kind thoughts and self-appreciation are no longer a threat, but your new baseline. Here's number 2. You explain yourself to people who never asked. Have you ever caught yourself giving a long, detailed story after saying a simple no, or making a basic choice that you knew wasn't someone else's choice? Maybe someone asks if you're free on the weekend or why you made a specific decision. And before they can even respond, you find yourself laying out an entire court case of excuses, of justifications, and reasons. Now, that urge to justify your existence, it's not just a habit. It's a deeply wired neurobiological survival mechanism. When I was first breaking free from these subconscious patterns, I remember a moment with my husband, Anthony. I was trying to explain why I couldn't do something, ramping up my usual long rationale, when he just gently looked at me and said, Lee, it's okay. You don't have to over-explain. I was completely stunned. My brain actually went into a spin. And I remember thinking, what do you mean I don't have to explain? You're not going to interrogate me. You're not going to punish me. My no is just enough? Now, growing up in a narcissistic home, a child learns very, very early that an unverified boundary is a dangerous one. If you said no, expressed a preference, or simply existed in your own truth without an airtight excuse, you may have been met with interrogation or accusations or guilt trips or maybe even explosive rage. Now, to protect yourself, your young brain learned to preemptively build a bulletproof defense before anyone could attack you. Your threat detection system, the amygdala, learned to view setting a boundary without a reason as an immediate trigger for emotional conflict or abandonment, firing off an automated neural loop that forces you to over-explain just to feel safe. This is a neurological loop. Now, when you catch yourself over-explaining today, realize that this is not your authentic voice. It is the echoed defense of a child who is never allowed to have boundaries without penalties. Now, in coaching, we know that what we track gets transformed. And since you cannot rewire a neural pathway until you make it conscious, thank you, Carl Jung, your daily coaching goal for today is to practice setting a clean boundary, then catching the urge to over-explain, and then holding space for the temporary anxiety that is naturally going to follow. The moment you feel that rapid panic to justify yourself, freeze the frame, take a breath, and label the mechanism by telling yourself, my nervous system is mistaking a boundary for danger. But I am an adult now, and no is a complete sentence. To build and reinforce this new neural pathway, keep a tracking counter on your phone or in a very simple notebook where you tally every time you set a clean boundary without adding any unnecessary over-explanation. Because reviewing those numbers at the end of the day or at the end of the week gives your brain tangible proof of progress, and it signals to your nervous system that you're going through an update or an upgrade. It signals to the nervous system that your autonomy is no longer a threat, but your new baseline. Number 3, you agree with things you do not really agree with. Have you ever caught yourself nodding along, smiling, or maybe even actively agreeing with something that made your stomach churn inside? Someone expresses maybe an opinion, or they state facts, air quotes, and before your conscious mind can even process your true stance, your mouth blurted out, "Yeah, I totally agree." That immediate compliance isn't a weakness. So I hope you get this. It's a deeply wired neurobiological survival mechanism running at the subconscious level. When I was a young girl, my dad asked me what I wanted to do with my life. I was about 17, and I proudly told him I wanted to be a writer. He immediately shut me down. "No, you'll never make any money. Become a nurse. Everyone dies." In that exact moment, I chose attachment over my authentic self. Now, growing up in a narcissistic home, you learn very, very early that you cannot trust your inner reality. Truth is constantly rewritten to serve the parent's ego, to perpetuate generational trauma, and toxic dynamics are swept under the rug. In that environment, the cost of disagreeing was severe. Sometimes it meant immediate rejection, or it meant being criticized, or it meant being ignored, or feeling completely exiled from the family unit. From a neurobiological standpoint, an innocent child relies entirely on parental attachment for safety and physical survival. And because disagreeing threatens that vital connection, your brain interprets expressing your authentic truth as a threat to your literal survival. The amygdala, the brain's alarm system, it learns to link authenticity with danger and compliance with safety. Now, this creates a high-speed neural loop that forces you to abandon your inner reality just to feel safe. And when you catch yourself agreeing with something that you don't believe, you want to realize that isn't your authentic voice. It could have been no other way. This is happening at super speed. It is the echoed surrender of a child who learned to fake agreement to avoid exile. Now, in coaching, like I said earlier, we know that what we track gets transformed. And during my own recovery, I kept a daily log of every time I said yes when I meant no, directly linking each moment to self-abandonment. That conscious awareness held me accountable because I refused to spend the rest of my life abandoning my inner child. I was done. Since you cannot rewire a neural pathway until you make it conscious, your daily coaching goal is to catch that automatic compliance and practice the power of a pause. The moment you feel the urge to agree, freeze the frame, take a breath, and tell yourself, my nervous system is mistaking a difference of opinion for exile, but it is safe for me to hold my own truth now. Track this in a notebook or on your phone by tallying every time you successfully pause, withhold automatic agreement, or speak your genuine truth. Reviewing those numbers at the end of the day or at the end of the week gives your brain the tangible proof of progress, which now signals to your nervous system that honoring your reality is your new baseline. If you are recognizing yourself already and some part of you is rushing to explain it away, that pull has a name. It's codependency. Over 50,000 people have taken my free codependency quiz to see whether codependency is quietly hurting their relationship with self and the relationships with others, and is also keeping them from living a full, conscious, empowered, autonomous life. So you can take it for free. The link is in the description box below. Number 4, you cannot let anybody do anything for you. Have you ever caught yourself just absolutely refusing help, even when you were exhausted, when you were sick, or you were drowning in tasks? Maybe somebody offered to lend a hand, and before you could evaluate if you needed it, your mouth just blurted out, "No thanks, I've got it covered." I mean, you didn't even think about whether or not you could use their help. That hyper-independence isn't just a strong work ethic. It's a neurobiological defense mechanism. Growing up in a narcissistic family, asking for help was dangerous. If you needed your parents for basic things like tying your shoes, you were called a baby. If you got sick with a fever, you weren't nurtured. You were treated as an inconvenience and a burden. Now, parents in these homes resent anyone they perceive as needy because it means they have to think about other versus self. I remember watching my brother always be on call for my parents. But the moment he needed help fixing a boiler, and my father was a mechanic, my father's response was exasperation. "Now you want me to be there?" Followed by a bunch of huffing and puffing and heavy guilt tripping. And when I had to file a restraining order, I asked my dad to please come to court with me because I was genuinely afraid. And he hemmed and he hawed. And I felt so guilty for even asking that a part of me stood there thinking, wait, shouldn't a father want to support his daughter in this type of a situation? I was baffled. As a child, your brain is hardwired to rely on caregivers for co-regulation and survival. When reaching out for support is met with contempt or guilt or rejection, your brain experiences these experiences as a threat to emotional safety and attachment. Your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, begins to associate needing help with danger and shame. Now, to protect you from that painful guilt, your brain then builds a high-speed neural loop where needing support triggers an actual threat response, which then deploys hyper-independence. You learn that depending on anyone stopped being safe. So your brain adopted a strict rule. Here's what it sounds like. If I don't ask for anything, no one can make me feel like a burden. What finally broke this barrier for me was during a time when I was separated, money was so tight. I was spent. And I was living on my own with my 3 children. I was surviving, but barely. And my best friend stepped in to help me throughout it. And one day, she and her husband, they sat me down and they looked me in the eye because they knew I was struggling with accepting their help. And they said, "Lisa, if we were in your shoes and you were in our shoes, would you help us? Would you do this for me?" And that single question completely dissolved the wall that I had built around receiving support. In that moment, I finally understood that giving and receiving are 2 equal flow-based parts of any healthy, loving relationship, and that allowing safe people to help you doesn't make you a burden. It actually honors the beautiful connection. To rewire this, your daily coaching goal is to practice receiving small, low-stakes support, to begin teaching your nervous system that receiving help as an adult does not carry a penalty, or at least it shouldn't. Choose one tiny thing each week that you would normally insist on doing yourself and allow someone else to handle it. It can be as simple as letting someone carry a heavy bag, saying yes when a colleague offers to drop you off a cup of coffee or grab you a cup of coffee, or letting your spouse clean up after dinner if they ask. The moment someone offers help, freeze the frame, take a deep breath, and silently tell your nervous system, receiving help is safe now. I'm not a burden. I'm worthy of support. Then keep a running tally on your phone or a notebook of every time you let someone else do something for you without over-apologizing or over-justifying. Now, it's important to review that list at the end of the day or the week because it gives your brain the visual proof that you can depend on safe people without losing your autonomy or your peace. Number 5, you plan for the disaster that never comes. Have you ever caught yourself running through every worst case scenario in your head before a big event, an important conversation, or maybe even a simple vacation? You mentally build elaborate backup plans for catastrophes that haven't happened and likely never will. That constant catastrophizing isn't just an overactive imagination. You're not broken. It is a deeply wired neurobiological safety mechanism, believe it or not. Growing up in an unpredictable or narcissistic family, chaos could erupt at any moment without warning. Now, to a child, sudden emotional outbursts, criticism, or abandonment feel life-threatening. And as a defense, remember your brain is developing. As a defense, your developing brain learned that expecting the worst actually felt like control. So your brain built a protective strategy that's called bracing, a form of pseudo-safety where you stay in a continuous state of hypervigilance and you are assuming that if you can predict the disaster, it won't destroy you when it hits. But this just keeps you in a loop. From a neuropsychological standpoint, catastrophizing keeps your amygdala literally stuck in a chronic threat response, flooding your system with cortisol and adrenaline. You're in the sympathetic pathway. Your nervous system mistakes the thought of a disaster for an active physical threat. Now, when I became more curious about the quantum laws of cause and effect, I began observing this exact pattern in myself, and I couldn't turn away once I saw it. I realized that expecting the worst was keeping me trapped in scarcity loops. By constantly bracing for impact, I was hijacking my own nervous system. There was simply no way I could align with a more desired, peaceful reality while my entire focus was broadcasting on disaster. Because what you broadcast emotionally is what you perpetuate. It could be no other way. I wanted to break this loop. Breaking this neural loop took me time, but I started changing my baseline by actively and purposefully redirecting my focus. I kept a manifestation notebook handy, and whenever I was driving or going about my day, I forced myself to notice things in my environment that I liked and I appreciated. The sunlight through the trees, a beautiful house, a pretty door, or a smooth drive. I consciously shifted my entire focus towards what brought me joy and what I just liked, rather than rehearsing what I didn't like and what I didn't want to happen. Now, your daily coaching objective is to move out of pseudo-safety and train your brain to rest in actual safety by redirecting your attention. This is metacognition. The moment you catch your mind building a disaster script, pause, take a deep breath that interrupts a loop, and say out loud, my amygdala is mistakenly bracing for safety. Nothing bad is happening right now, and it is safe for me to relax. Keep a dedicated notebook or a phone app nearby, and every time you catch a catastrophizing thought, write down 3 specific real-time things in your immediate environment that you appreciate or you enjoy. At the end of each day, before you go to bed, or at the end of the week, tally each time you interrupt a catastrophe loop and redirect your mind to a positive focus. Now, reviewing these numbers at the end of the week gives your nervous system concrete proof that you no longer need disaster planning to stay safe. Isn't that awesome? Number 6, you, dear one, are the broom and the mop and the paper towels. Have you ever felt deeply anxious or restless, or even bored when there are no problems in your life to fix or people to fix in the immediate future? Maybe you jump at the chance to fix someone else's mess, or you jump to clean up a crisis, or you are very familiar with and comfortable with being an emotional paramedic. And this is not because you want to, but because resting feels dangerous. Now, growing up with an obsessively cleaning mother who bleached the walls weekly and unscrewed the stove to clean it like every week, in our home, resting wasn't permitted. Staying still meant hostile, nasty punishment was on the horizon. I learned very quickly that if I kept moving and tried to help her clean, or if I smiled at my father instead of telling my truth, they were less punishing and my dad could be more attentive. Not my mom, but my dad. That survival dynamic taught me to live completely externally focused, seeking safety strictly through how others perceived and treated me. Now, here's the neuropsychology of constant fixing. When survival in childhood depends on managing a parent's mood or environment, your brain undergoes functional conditioning. Your amygdala links stillness with impending threat and usefulness with safety. So, dear one, if you're codependent, you are not crazy. It's only your programming. Being the caretaker releases brief hits of dopamine and relief by lowering your immediate threat response, creating an addiction to problem solving. When there is no fire to put out, your nervous system experiences a drop in stress hormones as a false alarm, interpreting peace as the calm before a storm. During my own recovery, I noticed how intensely anxious I became whenever I had no fires to put out. And I had to learn to sit on my codependent hands. I had to learn how to shutty and stop looking for stray puppies to rescue. And that is when I started to really commit to journaling and meditation, realizing that the more I could see the holes in my subconscious wall, the more metacognitive control I had over my behavior, my thoughts, and my emotions. If you feel bored or anxious when you aren't fixing someone else's life, dear one, that's a clue. Your daily coaching goal is to practice tolerating peace without creating a job for yourself. When the urge to rescue strikes, you want to pause, you want to freeze the frame, and tell yourself, my nervous system is mistaking stillness for danger, but I am safe to rest. And keeping a daily log of every time you consciously refrain from jumping into someone else's mess, and tally your wins at the end of the week. When you do this, you're showing your brain that your worth isn't tied to being the mop, the broom, or the paper towels. Number 7, you keep people at a distance in case they see what your mother saw. Have you ever desperately longed to feel seen and loved and understood, yet the moment someone tries to get truly close to you, an invisible wall goes up? You rescue, you enable, you keep the focus on them, maybe you overfunction, and this is only showing them the shiny, hyper-competent parts of yourself while keeping your true self, your true heart, safely out of reach. That push and pull dynamic isn't a personality flaw. There's nothing wrong with you. It's a neurobiological survival response. Growing up with emotional and verbal abuse, you internalize a profound sense of toxic shame. I feared making friends when I was little, because I worried that if they got too close, they would see whatever my mother saw in me, even though I was baffled. I wasn't sure what she saw. And I was afraid that they would eventually punish me or neglect me the way she did. So I learned that it felt safe or safer to stay alone. I was terrified of being seen. Keeping busy meant I could hide the parts of me I thought were shameful. The ones my mother taught me to actually be ashamed of. I was terrified that if I expressed a need, I would be viewed as selfish, that they'd see an ugly stain or they'd hate me. And I was afraid that if I rested, I'd be labeled lazy. And if I cried, I'd be called a drama queen. So I couldn't be my true self. My codependent caretaking was a desperate attempt to cover up those emotional scars. Now, here's the neuroscience of vulnerability avoidance from a brain perspective. Your amygdala learned to associate vulnerability with annihilation. In childhood, being transparent exposed you to criticism, rejection, and emotional exile. Your brain adapted by building a protective rule. Intimacy equals exposure, and exposure leads to rejection and shame. To keep you safe, your threat detection system deploys hypervigilance and caretaking as a sort of protective armor, allowing you to stay close enough to be needed, but distant enough to never be fully seen. Here's what you can do to start getting out of this. You're going to face your boo-boos and love yourself completely. As I coached myself through codependency recovery, I had to confront my fear of intimacy. And I realized that if I could heal the shame, if I could forgive myself and learn to accept myself completely, it really wouldn't matter how others perceived me. And I wanted to be authentic. I wanted to be in touch with my authentic self. I wanted to be transparent and stand on my own 2 feet, even if someone rejected me. And I committed. I refused to spend the rest of my life internally collapsing, which is what codependents do, just to secure someone else's temporary approval. Now, I fixed this by turning inward, by facing my boo-boos and actively learning to love myself, my inner child. Every time I caught that harsh inner voice attacking my vulnerability, I taught myself to nudge the judge. And whenever a negative self-judgment surfaced, my mantra became, nudge the judge and not today. I did it over and over and over. Your daily coaching goal is to practice letting your guard down in safe micro moments. The next time you catch yourself hiding behind overfunctioning or people pleasing or overdoing or over-explaining, you're putting up a wall, you want to freeze the frame, take a breath, and use the mantra, nudge the judge, not today. Say to yourself, it is safe for me to be seen, and my worth is already complete, and I'm okay even if they abandon me. Now you want to track every moment you choose self-compassion over self-concealment, giving your nervous system tangible proof that authenticity is no longer dangerous. It is your doorway to emotional sobriety and emotional freedom. If you found yourself in a few of those, dear ones, stay with me. Not one of those habits of thinking is actually strange. Every single one of them made perfect sense in the house you learned it in. This is neuroscience. A child who agrees does not get punished. A child who explains everything does not get accused. A child who needs nothing does not get let down. They were never habits. They were how you got through the day. But you are not in that house anymore. And you are still doing all those 7 things possibly. And that is the part nobody unlearns on their own. If this work resonates with you, please check out my 12-week breakthrough coaching program. I can coach you through these dynamics. Now, this is a program I specifically created for adult children of alcoholics and adult children of narcissistic parents who grew up feeling emotionally invisible, who grew up feeling neglected, who grew up feeling unseen and unheard, and who self-erased just to get through the day. It is the Above the Veil method level 1, and it is how I teach people to change the survival codes they were raised on. I will teach you how to reparent yourself. I will teach you how to rewrite the subconscious programs running underneath your conscious life. I will give you the tools that you need, the ones you deserved in childhood, to help you become the master of your life, the authority of your life, the authority of your own life. and a better parent too if you have children. Now, over 5,000 adult children across my courses and community are learning to self-heal. And dear one, you can too. The link is in the description box, and you can actually start week 1 today. I will see you on the inside the members only portal. Bye for now, until next time.